Have you ever sat in a room full of people who love you and still felt alone? Not left out, not ignored, just quietly, inexplicably separate. Like there is a thin layer of glass between you and everyone else, and you are the only one who can see it. You smile at the right moments, you say the right things, and yet somewhere underneath all of it, a voice runs on a low, quiet frequency. You don't quite belong here. If that feeling is familiar, not as a passing moment, but as a permanent condition that follows you from room to room, from job to job, from relationship to relationship, then you are not broken. You are experiencing something psychology has only recently begun to name. And the name matters because you have likely spent most of your life assuming the problem was you. There is a word for it: monachopsis. The subtle, persistent sense of being out of place. Not dramatic alienation, not crisis-level isolation, just a low, steady hum of not quite fitting wherever you happen to land. And here is the first thing you need to understand. The pain of that feeling is not imagined. It is biological. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA placed volunteers inside brain scanners and had them experience social exclusion. What she found was striking. The brain responds to social rejection in the same way it responds to physical pain, activating the same neural regions that light up when you scrape your knee or break a bone. Humans have a fundamental need to belong, and a lack of social connection registers as genuinely painful, not metaphorically, but neurologically. So when you walk into a room and feel that familiar distance rising, your nervous system is not being dramatic. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. It is registering the gap between where you are and where some deeper part of you needs to be. The question is why that gap never seems to close. For many people who feel out of place everywhere, the answer does not begin in adulthood. It begins much earlier, in the rooms of childhood, in the particular quality of attention, or its absence, that surrounded them when they were still becoming. The feeling of being on the outside is described again and again by people who grew up in households where emotional attunement was inconsistent or absent. Not necessarily households of cruelty, sometimes simply households of busyness, of distance, of unspoken rules about which feelings were acceptable and which ones needed to be hidden. When a child's inner world is not consistently met, reflected, or welcomed, something quiet happens. They begin to learn that the safest version of themselves is the edited one, the one that watches carefully, the one that adapts before it is even asked, the one that monitors the room for cues about what is needed and then performs that thing skillfully, to stay close enough to belonging without ever fully arriving inside it. And they get very good at it. So good, in fact, that by adulthood, they have become fluent in a language most people never have to learn. The language of reading rooms, of detecting emotional undercurrents before they surface, of knowing almost instantly what each new environment requires of them and reshaping accordingly. Research in social psychology shows that people who feel less integrated into groups develop what's called enhanced perceptual acuity. The brain compensates by becoming remarkably skilled at reading situations and spotting connections others miss. You learned to notice tone, posture, the half-second pause before someone answers, the energy that shifts when a particular name is mentioned. You read what others feel before they have found words for it. Not because you are exceptional, because you were trained by necessity. Because attention, for you, was never casual. It was survival. But here is the quiet cost of that fluency. When you can become whatever the room needs, you slowly lose the fixed coordinates of who you actually are. Every new environment asks for a slightly different version of you, and you provide it, efficiently, almost automatically. Until one day you sit in a quiet moment and realize you are not entirely sure which version is the real one. Perhaps you feel like a chameleon, constantly adapting to your surroundings, yet still feeling an internal emptiness. Not because nothing matters to you, but because everything you present has been filtered through the question of what is safe to show. Identity, under those conditions, never fully hardens. It stays soft, provisional, adjustable. And so you move through life perpetually translating. You understand what the people in the room need. You mirror it beautifully. But somewhere underneath the performance, a quieter question persists. Does anyone in here actually see me? This is the loneliness that is hardest to explain. Not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of being surrounded and still unseen. Of laughing at the right moment and feeling, in the same breath, completely unreachable. The same brain region activated when we crave food is activated when we crave social connection. Belonging is not a luxury. It is a need as fundamental as hunger, and when it remains chronically unmet, even in rooms full of people, the nervous system carries that deficit as a kind of background ache. A low-grade exhaustion that is difficult to name because nothing on the surface looks wrong. You are present. You are functioning. You are, by every observable measure, fine. And yet something essential keeps arriving at the table and finding the seat already taken. The adaptation becomes its own kind of trap, because the very skills that allowed you to survive also make it harder to be found. When you are always adjusting, always reading, always shaping yourself to fit the contours of the space around you, genuine contact requires dropping the instrument for a moment. And dropping it feels dangerous. It always has. So you carry both things, the longing to be fully known, and the learned instinct that makes full knowing feel unsafe. But here is what the research also shows, and this part matters. The qualities that grew from that early training are not simply wounds. They are rare, specific, and deeply needed. Psychologists studying resilience have found that chronic outsiders develop what they call everyday resilience, a sustained ability to navigate discomfort that most people never need to develop. You built an internal stability that does not depend on external acceptance, because external acceptance was never guaranteed. You learned to find your footing on shifting ground. You also learned empathy in its most rigorous form. Not the polished sympathy of someone who has read about pain, but the embodied understanding of someone who has sat with their own quiet ache long enough to recognize it instantly in others. Psychology research consistently shows that people who have experienced social exclusion develop stronger empathetic responses. Not surface-level empathy, but the kind that can sit with someone in their darkest moments without reaching immediately for a fix. You know what it means to need someone to simply stay. And so you stay. And the cognitive flexibility you developed, the ability to move between worlds, to understand perspectives that feel completely foreign to most people, to hold contradictions without collapse, that is not a symptom of having no identity. It is the architecture of a mind trained by transition, formed in the in-between. While embracing individuality is valuable, feeling different doesn't mean you are unworthy of belonging. It often signals growth, self-awareness, and a kind of perception most people never develop. You are not out of place because something is wrong with you. You are out of place because you arrived in environments too small for what you actually are. Because the rooms you were given early on required you to make yourself smaller, quieter, more manageable. And you learned that shape so well, you began to mistake it for your actual dimensions. The feeling of not belonging everywhere is not evidence of your inadequacy. It is evidence of a self that was never fully allowed to take up space. And the work, if there is work to be done, is not to finally find the room where you fit perfectly. It is to stop performing for the room entirely. To let the version that has been waiting quietly underneath the adaptations take one full breath in public and see what happens. You were not born out of place. You were taught to feel that way. And what is learned can, slowly, be unlearned. If this reflection found something in you that has been waiting to be named, consider staying. This channel explores the quiet interior of human experience, the parts that rarely get said out loud, but that many people carry alone. Subscribe if you'd like to continue. And if you feel out of place often, I'd genuinely like to hear from you. When did you first notice that feeling? Share it in the comments. You might be more recognized there than you expect.